If you're anything like me, you see the success of various comic creators on their crowdfunding projects. You look at that and say, hey, I've got a story to tell. I want to try that. Well, good for you. That's the first step. My name's Preston Poulter, and I've set out to do exactly that. In this series of videos, I'm going to share my experiences with you, my successes, my failures, in the hopes that you will learn and be able to apply these lessons for yourself. So being an indie comic creator is a little like being in a rock band. You're looking for venues to do in order to go out, promote your stuff. The good news is for the indie comic creator, you can tend to make money at the small venues, whereas I hear about a lot of bands just kind of playing for free or exposure, or there are horror stories about some of the more successful clubs where the band has to play there, or has to pay to play. Although I suppose that's a bit like indie comic creators having to pay for for a comic venue. Like you want a table at Los Angeles Comic Con, that's going to be $400, and if you're hawking one book, there's no way you're going to make anything close to that. So you kind of are. I guess they're analogous. You are paying for exposure. But the good news is at the really small venues, you can easily make your money back. Whereas like I said, there's no way you're making $400 hawking one book at LA Comic Con. Now, what you can do is you can get a pro badge or something like San Diego Comic Con. Save you a bit of money if you're a fan and like to go to that kind of thing. But in terms of making money, getting fans sitting behind the table, hawking your wares, you're always looking for venues. So, one of the nice things I like here in Dallas is there's North Dallas Toy Show, and I do pretty well there. People like comics. I've got metal trading cards, I got prints, I'm able to sell all that stuff. So, and I collect email addresses, so that's been a good venue. And I was looking at other places, so I'm starting to look at flea markets. And so over the weekend, I went to Harry Hines Bazaar and I rented a table. It cost me all of $60. I'm like, $60? Well, I mean, I sold like $120 in like the first 90 minutes at the North Dallas Toy Show. I'm like, $60, that's nothing. So, but wow, this was not a very sympathetic clientele in terms of comic books. For one, I was the only comic vendor there. So in the future, if you are thinking about renting a table at a flea market, look around. Is anybody selling comic books? If you see zero people selling comic books, that's typically an indicator of you should look elsewhere. This is not an appropriate venue. This was a very Latino crowd. Didn't hear a lot of English, a lot of romantic ballads being blasted in Spanish. And over the first 3 days or so, I was able to sell $55. I just took off Sunday. I'm sure if I would have worked Sunday, I would have made more than my table fee, although that's revenue, not profit. I'm just like, it's not worth it. So I didn't bother coming on Sunday. So one of the things I gotta say, Latino people are very nice and very friendly, particularly the other vendors there. Man, other vendors were buying me coffee. They were encouraging me to come back. They were really great people, but like by and large, Latinos just not into comic books. And I was thinking, I got my very first comic book, White Lily. I paid to have it translated into Spanish, and then I was looking for comic book distributors in Mexico, and I couldn't find any. And the more I looked at the culture, the more I realized sequential art with word bubbles is just not really a big thing in Latino circles. So it's not a receptive crowd, and this is why you don't see a Latino superhero. It's just not a market that really wants to be serviced in this way, and then they're just not very responsive. One thing that allowed me to sell as well as I did, I have to say, was Alterna Comics. Man, that stuff was a lifesaver. One of the very first sales I made. Let's take a look at that happy little fella right there. And that ultimately is the opportunity I saw in the market. Is you had these big families going through with just the parents were there to go shopping for clothes and cologne and jewelry and all the stuff that was there at the bazaar. And the kids were just kind of running around, and a lot of kids, like they like colorful stuff. They are certainly receptive to comics, but they're like 5. So, like he came up, and I looked at him, and I'm like, "Hey, you like comic books?" And he looks and he nodded, and then the parents called him away, and then I'm like, "No, no, no, he likes comic books." And the parents looked at me like, "Oh, he does?" I'm like, "Yeah." And so there was a copy of Mr. Crypt, done by Alterna Comics, which is a comedy, and it's all age appropriate. And I showed it to him, and he loved it. He grabbed it, he started laughing his head off. And when that happens, well, now the parents have to go, okay, how much is it? I'm like, only $10. Boom, easy sale. So Peter Smetty was pretty happy about that. I got a retweet, so that was awesome. After I made that sale and saw how many kids there were, I'm like, damn, I should have ordered more, more Mr. Cripps, which I have since done. I have placed a reorder with Alterna Comics. Got some more Mr. Cripps. I also sold out of sci-fi stuff because it's one of the things I was able to do with kids wanting to buy. Like, hey, you like spaceships, you like aliens, and then I'd hand them a copy of Exilium or Eden. So I sold out of all of those. Um, I was pitching both, my comic White Lily about the deadliest female combat pilots who ever lived. I sold a few copies, but by and large, certainly no kid was really particularly interested in that, and I understand. For that matter, I don't know what this says necessarily about Latino culture, but no one gave a damn about Tinseltown, which I read while I was just sitting there. I had a lot of free time. And Tinseltown is another one by Alterna Comics, and it's about this lady cop in the early days of Hollywood and her fight against sexism as she's trying to solve the crime. And women and the men's workplace and all that. Latino people did not give a damn about that. They would just just look at me like, what? Seriously? So, yeah, they are very gender traditional in that way and are not interested in the empowered women storyline. And so I suppose if the creators of Marvel had sat there at that flea market table with me and seen how those crowds were reacting to Tinseltown, they would have said, "Oh, you know what? America Chavez, totally bad idea. This comic will never go anywhere." Which, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and say, which I know at this point in time is not a particularly bold prediction, America Chavez never going anywhere. The market they're attempting to appeal to, the Latino market, has no interest in an empowered lesbian alien. It's absurd when you talk with these people that the marketing think, oh yeah, this is a market. There is not. There's absolutely not a market there. So no. The comic books I was able to sell in terms of White Lily, which in terms of women adopting a male role, because these women were fighter pilots and it is historical, was sold because it was World War II and it's airplanes and it had great artwork. They were buying it for that. They weren't like, oh wow, women doing stuff. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna show this to my daughter and she wants to be an empowered woman. That was not what they wanted to see, and so what Marvel's trying to do is going into the realm of, oh hey, this is how the market should be. We're gonna educate this market. No. Whenever you're trying to educate your consumer in order to get them to want what it is you're selling, you're never gonna succeed. Sorry, no, give up. So, I was able to sell some comics. Definitely, Alterna Comics was great at the $1.50 price point. I was able to make some sales, make some new friends. I am not going back to that one. Now there is other flea markets here in Dallas, and I'm looking around. Hey, they sell comics, so that's certainly greener pastures. I just wanted to try this one out because it was so close to home. Now, one thing I could see, if I really had to make a living there in a mostly Latino market area, I could almost abandon the comic book angle altogether, but instead take the comic book fashions because they do like colors. The market seemed very responsive to colors, and I saw a lot of bright colors. I'm looking around, but if I could take the comic images and put them on T-shirts or hats or something, I could probably sell a few of those. And for that matter, I sold a wall print while I was there, so that was nice. So there are ways to take a comic medium and kind of appeal to that market, but traditional comic book sales, no, not so much. One thing was a fan of, I started doing about 6 weeks ago or so, is I have my iPad there so that you can enter your email address and go straight on my email list. One, that's way better than doing it handwritten because when people write it down by hand and later you're trying to enter it, it is maddening how many, like the way they write it, and you have to interpret these little symbols, and you don't get it precisely, well, you don't have their email. So I have my iPad there, and there's a MailChimp app. You can just download it. It's free. And then people can type in their email, and they'll type it in correctly. And now, now I'm getting a 100% capture rate with no errors. It's awesome. And since I have my iPad there, I started bringing a Bluetooth speaker and then just streaming, my music to it. And boy, it was great having that there because, like if you're there, you have to kind of announce a presence. You have to kind of create this excitement. And, again, a sale is a transfer of excitement. And, if people are walking by and you're feeling ignored, and particularly if, you're being drowned out by music from other booths, in this case, that's not even in a language you understand, you just start to feel irrelevant and small and meaningless. But boom, on comes a song you like. You're able to turn up. You create a presence. This song comes on. People are like, "Oh my God!" Like, what is this? And you're kind of dancing around. You're creating your own vibe. You're creating your own energy, and people respond to that. So I'm a big fan of music. If you're gonna start, working the comic circuit, get an iPad, get a Bluetooth speaker. Start becoming kind of your own little mini DJ. Think of these things as kind of a party that you're hosting, and approach it like a rock band. You need to create an aura of coolness. People need to come and go, man, what's this guy doing? And then you get them involved. You make sales. That's how it works. And then it's a lot more fun. Next week is going to be North Dallas Toy Show. Boy, I can't wait. After dealing with people who, language was an issue and they didn't even really like comics, I can't wait to get back to North Dallas Toy Show. Despite the fact it's a tiny show, like I'm just champing at the bit, like boom, I'm going to kick butt there next week. So I'll take you through that. I'll show you some of the sales I make. Hopefully record some live videos from customers who are purchasing. Meanwhile, my Kickstarter and Indiegogo for Guinevere and the Divinity Factory is doing pretty well. So going into the final week, there's a link down in the description if you want to check that out. I look forward to reading your comments. If you're thinking of diving into this comic business, feel free to message me. I'm on Twitter. You can leave a comment here. You can go over to my website, Pocket Jacks Comics, get on my email list. I'm easy to get in touch with, and I love talking to creators and fans for that matter. Take care. Bye.